хорошей ноте наше сегодняшнее мероприятие. Осталась крайняя сессия.
Formation of sustainable internet infrastructure. The first speaker is Olaf Kolkman, Internet Technologies Officer, and the topic is information security. And since we have a well-synchronized concept of internet infrastructure, which is decentralized concept, I believe that Olaf will make a good presentation about how to ensure information security, provided the current decentralization which we support. If it was centralized, then information security would be better provided.
I wonder if I will live up to that introduction, but let's give it a try. This is the thing by which I can advance slides, if everything is well. Yeah. So I showed this picture before, and to me, this network of networks, the network layer, signifies something important. This is the picture that we usually have in mind when we talk about the vast internet that we have. And remember that this morning I talked about collaboration and so on and so forth. And if we think about the internet and the reason why it thrives economically, it's because of a few fundamental principles. Open standards, collaboration, reusable building blocks, integrity, end-to-end integrity over that internet, the ability to innovate without having to ask permission of the network operator, and the global reach. If you're at some point on the internet and you want to reach somebody else, you can just do that. I'm now going to look at the interpreter and ask her if I don't speak too fast. Thank you. Now, this internet is not without risk, of course. We all know this. We've seen it. There are people that exploit these properties of the internet, the openness of the internet, and try to, do their malicious things. They fraud, they thwart, they infect, they listen, they do all kinds of bad stuff. Now you have to remember that bad stuff is not necessarily caused by these key characteristics that I was just talking about. So, Internet Invariance is a paper that we did at the Internet Society which captures those key principles: the global connectivity and integrity, the global reach and consistent view from any point in the network. If you look at the internet from the Netherlands, it in essence looks the same as that I look at the internet from Kyrgyzstan, from Bishkek. Whether I'm at home or in Bishkek, the speeds might differ a bit, but in essence, I'm looking at the same internet. Permission-free innovation. I can write an app today and make it work on the internet. My colleague over there was just showing, Maxim was just showing me an application called FireChat, which uses internet protocol to just talk to people that are in your surroundings. That's permissionless innovation. Nobody has to ask somebody else to create such an application. Accessibility. You can join that network and you can make use of it. And then the spirit of cooperation. And of course, those are all exploitable parameters if you talk about security. We have an open platform, so it's open for attack and intrusion. We have a permission-free innovation. That means that somebody can also, without asking permission, develop what we call malware, so that's programs that do bad things, and deploy those on the internet. We have a global reach, which means that somebody who is in this area of the world can attack services in the other area of the world. A criminal from the Netherlands, from Amsterdam, can attack a Bishkek server. And we have voluntary cooperation and collaboration in order to solve these problems. There's no central mandate in order to solve security problems. And of course, there's a user's expectation. They want to trust the network in order to do business. As long as they trust the network, they will use it for social and commercial interaction. The network has value as long as it's trusted. If we don't trust the internet anymore, if I don't trust the internet anymore, I will not fill in my credit card details. I will not leave behind a trail of breadcrumbs that make my identity, which can then be stolen and exploited by somebody else. If that is the case, I will stop using the internet. Trust is the parameter that we need to maintain. And trust is something psychological. It's very hard to capture and to measure. And if we talk about trust, then there are a number of things that come into play. Security, stability, confidentiality, integrity, resiliency, and scalability. Those are all tools which we use in order to build trust. So why do we care about security? Now, security, I've noticed, is a very hard to translate word. If I were to use this in the Netherlands, security would translate into protection from harm, but also the sense of being safe. So it's very hard to translate a term, but we want to be secure and feel secure. It's, that's the type of things. Policy measures that are premised on stopping bad things rather than protecting what is value provide no guide as to how far those measures should go. In other words, if I try to protect the bad stuff, it doesn't say, a policy measure doesn't necessarily tell me you have to stop implementing the measure here. It could be that a policy measure would be block everything from a specific region in which bad things happen. That's not a good policy measure, but it doesn't give guidance on what good looks like. If we're not careful, that whole spectrum of cyber threats can be used as a vehicle for control of networks and how they are used. That includes pervasive monitoring. If the cybersecurity threats become so high that there is so much regulatory pressure to control these cybersecurity threats, those measures of control can also be used to counter the freedoms of the individual users that do not do harm. So we have to throw out these perceptions. The approaches, the way that we usually approach internet security is look at the assets that we have. What are the things that we think are valuable, and what are the threats to those assets? If I have a ring and I go abroad, an expensive ring with a diamond, I'm thinking about who can take this ring. That could be somebody, who sneaks into my house. So I deal with that with building a safe deposit box in which I can store the ring, or I bring it to a bank vault in the thing. But that's the traditional way that we think about security. We think about what is our threat, what is the threat that we try to cope with, and what is the assets that we are trying to protect, and we sort of try to build a wall around those assets. At the internet, it's actually important to look at that greater good. how do you also protect all these benefits that the internet brings, these principles that the internet brings? Throwing away, there's a saying in the Netherlands, I don't know if it translates, but it's throwing away the baby with the bathwater. It's throwing away good things while you're trying to deal with something dirty. You have to take that into your mind. So, in the end, you have to understand security. Security is not an end in itself. It's there to establish trust. And trust is an economic perspective. You have to invest sufficiently in order to, feel confident that things happen. There's no such thing as absolute security. That ring that is in that vault, it can be stolen. If somebody with sufficient money and sufficient skill gets into my vault, they can get my ring. Same for the internet. So your threat-based analysis, your threat analysis is always an economic trade-off. What kind of attackers what kind of resources do the attackers have at their disposal to get the things that I want? We do need to think about secure in terms of residual risk. Are they acceptable in a specific context? If I type in my credit card number on a web page, is that secure enough? If that is stolen, am I insured? What's the risk of that insurance? What is the risk to me personally that I lose money with that insurance in place? Now there are inward and outward risks, and I'm going to look at that a little bit more. Resiliency is one of the things that we're trying to achieve in the internet by variation. By trying to cope with what is coming at us, we try to be a little bit stronger. Multiple defense walls, multiple ways of, multiple firewalls, multiple things that if one aspect of the internet drops, another aspect of the internet stays open. For instance, under denial of service attacks. Or if you have software that you have two packages that do the same thing but make sure that they come from a different source. So if there's a bug in one, the other part of your service will continue to serve because that doesn't have the bug. Inwards and outward risks. This is a complex picture, but we used to think about security looking at our own perimeter. We looked at, if we think about security, we think about keeping our computers secure with a virus scanner. We think about keeping our enterprise networks secure with a firewall. But there can also be things that originate in my network and have an external effect. So not only threats from outside coming inwards, but also threats from inside going outward. Good examples of those are distributed denial of service attacks, where botnet operators, internal threat, botnets are pieces of programs that are introduced into your computer by a virus, that are controlled by evil people, and they will use your computer to launch an attack to something that is external. So there's an internal aspect to this, but there's also an external aspect to this type of security. And if we think about that the security of the global network and the value that it brings, we also have to think about that external perspective. And that is where the responsibility of the individuals that are part of the network comes in. If you are a network operator, if you operate a network, one of these tiny little networks on the internet, you are part of the internet. And suddenly the security of the internet is something that is also important for you. And so you have to take that responsibility. And again, accessibility, permission-free innovation, and the global reach are the things that we want to protect in that context, with each other. It's where collaboration is very important. So each network is responsible not only for its own security, but also contributes to the overall security of the whole internet. And the challenge is to create a culture of security, a culture of responsibility. ingredients for what I call collaborative cybersecurity is international collaboration, because most of these issues are cross-border. Make sure that if somebody commits a cyber crime across the border, that you have the how do you call them, the exchange agreements in place to extradite people. Do try to preserve those internet values. Really think hard if blocking is the right way to solve a problem. Sometimes it is, but then think about what is the place to do the blocking. Sometimes it's better to tell an end user, here, install a virus scanner, than saying, we will block traffic for you, because you might not be able to do that. Try to do a technical foundation that you can share, so that you get resilience. Open standards are, in my opinion, key to that. And you have a collaborative responsibility. That's industry self-regulation. And if the industry doesn't self-regulate in these type of things, regulation will at some point, come upon you. As an operator, you can do a bunch of things, and I'm not going to read them out. As a government, you can do a bunch of things, and I'm not going to read them out, because I want to get to an example of collaborative security and collaborative threats and threats to the internet, and the change of trust, because we're dealing with attackers that have a completely different economic model than where we're used to. When we built the internet, we secured it for, script kiddies, for men in the middle that didn't have, endless resources. The Snowden revelations showed us that there are entities with enormously deep pockets that have the ability to collect traffic on a large scale. We call that pervasive scale, pervasive monitoring. When that was disclosed, the IETF, the Internet Engineering Task Force, the technologies that create the open standards, and not only them, also other institutions, other private companies, looked at this and said, the trust in the internet is severely broken by these revelations. People will not trust communication over the internet now that they know that there are big parties that sniff up and look at all the traffic that goes over the lines without our control. And that might be for very good reasons, anti-terrorism, those are valid reasons. They might be for law enforcement. But if you look at what is an attack in engineering terms, then an attack is diverting the intention of the end users. On the internet, it's all about the end-to-end principle. You have one party that wants to communicate with another party, and if anything happens to that traffic, which is not of the intent of that party that is that is at the end point, it's considered an attack. If somebody listens into that traffic, you cannot be sure whether it's a hacker or a government agency that tries to do a good thing or a government agency that tries to do a bad thing. You cannot tell that from looking at the endpoints of the traffic. That means from an engineering perspective, and there's something else. The spy of today, the state actor of today, is the script kiddie of tomorrow. Yeah? What a state actor can do today, a script kiddie can do the day after tomorrow. It's really, technology goes everywhere, it sort of democratizes. So, if you want to protect against that, you have to really consider the listening into end-to-end traffic as an attack. And the IETF said, we consider this an attack and we have to increase the costs of listening into traffic significantly. The only way we can do that is by introducing encryption. Now, they're not the only ones who did that. End users actually have a role in this. So end users that operate web servers have created more web servers that listen on HTTPS, the secured version of HTTP. The browser manufacturers have said, if HTTPS is available, we'll pick that first. So that's another party in this whole ecosphere. And users became more aware of this. So what we've seen is that the amount of HTTPS traffic, and this is just one measurement, there are more, has increased from 8 to 17%, and it's still increasing. I have to say, I'm talking about the NSA revelations, but that's not the only way to do this type of the increased use of encryption. It is a common sense thing to do. If you are walking around with your laptop in this environment, everybody can listen into your traffic. So, it's a good thing to do this. There are things that will become more difficult. If you want to do filtering of bad traffic, censorship of traffic, whether it's traffic that is wanted by the end customer, or whether it's child abuse, stuff that we all agree that we would like to see eradicated from the internet, will be more difficult. Law enforcement will be more difficult, not impossible. Yeah? Everything, all traffic in the clear, is a reality that we don't want to have. That doesn't work. Because the script kiddie of tomorrow will read your credit card details. We don't want to do internet business on an unencrypted internet. Encryption will reduce the number of parties that see traffic. And remember, you saw all the network maps. You know where your traffic is going. It's going out of your country, and it's going at least through 3 other countries. Those parties on those links can all look at that traffic. So it's in the benefit of, confidential to do that. Now, there will still be parties that see the traffic pass by and can infer information from that. For instance, if you talk to Google, they will decrypt all the information if that's your endpoint, and they will store whatever you send them. The world still moves ahead on a voluntary basis. People may still choose to not do encryption. It's not mandated. Nobody tells anybody use encryption. The engineering community says we want to introduce that, but nobody needs to do this. Surveillance is more difficult, not impossible. I always call this the French Connection model. If you remember that movie, you always saw this guy in this police car watching people going from A to B and not doing anything. He didn't listen to any of their conversation. He just saw people go from A to B and from B to C. All metadata still available. Useful technical things need to be done in different ways. Proxies, traffic optimization, resampling of video streams. And there's possibility of bad things happening, because people really need to look into that encryption. What will happen? The other example that I had is routing, stability and resilience, but I'm not going to go into that. One of the things that you want to do if you're interested in this is have a look at this website. It's the only pointer that I'm going to give, because otherwise I'll be violently out of time. We can take questions now, or shall we do that at the end? At the end? Yeah? Okay.
Спасибо, Олаф. Действительно, у нас только сейчас получается по 20 минут на презентацию, поэтому я буду очень признателен, если будем выдерживать этот график. Тогда следующее выступление — это Максима Буртикова, директора по внешним связям. Это Восточная Европа и Центральная Азия в AM CST. И разговор будет вестись о протоколе IPv6. От этого протокола нам, то есть это никак нам не избежать. Это наступит. Ну, я хочу просто упомянуть о том, что вот мы обучаем в рамках ЦИСКО Академии курсы, и там уже все лабораторные задания, они уже с использованием этого протокола, да, то есть IPv4 уже не используется. Поэтому это вот уже наступает, вот как Максим вот подходит к этой трибуне, да?
Большое спасибо. Работает? Работает. PDF не открывает?
Туда не отображается.
Ну, хорошо. Какой вариант? Давайте флешку скорее.
Ну, пока, если по вопросам безопасности есть вопросы, может, мы тогда, если у кого-то возникли, мы можем попросить Олафа ответить, чтобы не терять время.
В принципе, можно подключить к вам.
So the question is, I know IETF has very useful initiatives for like adopting encryption for HTTP itself, and so recently we've organized some cybersecurity conference, and there were many opinions that increasing encrypting traffic can lead to some problem for law enforcement agency. So from one side, do you expect some increasing pressure from law enforcement agencies to IETF or to some organization with things like to provide them certificates for decrypting the traffic and so on? And from other side, do you expect increasing of using malware programs by law enforcement agencies like Finfisher and so on, with the increasing of encrypted traffic? Thank you.
Simply, yes and yes. One of the more interesting news bits that I read the other day was that there were a few weeks back there were two sort of interviews. It was an interview with the director of the FBI, and the director of the FBI was pushing strongly back to the encryption of phones by Apple. By which they said, you know, it will become impossible for us to do any surveillance. I do not necessarily agree with that claim because again, because of the French connection model, it will become more costly though. There is an increased cost. Having a guy sit in a car watching a drug dealer go in and out of a building is enormously costly. It's more costly than setting up a sniffing box that listening to all the traffic. At the same time, in a lecture, I believe at Stanford, the director of the NSA said, "No, we don't need that. We're not afraid of encryption, and we think it's important that that be deployed." That can mean several things. It can mean that the NSA has the ability to crack all the keys that are available on the internet. But it can also mean, and I think that's more likely, by the way, it can also mean that the metadata that's being collected is more than sufficient for them to do their job. I don't know whether their job is more difficult or more easy than that of the FBI, but it's something to be aware of. So there is a tussle between these, you know, these worlds, between the arguments, and this is indeed a debate to be had. The technology, as I said, is voluntary. It's voluntary adoption of technology. Nobody must use encryption. Everybody may use encryption. Now, I have to say that if you buy a telephone, and the market of telephones is not that big, there are a few vendors of operating systems on telephones. If the operating systems of the vendors of operating systems for telephones introduce encryption by default, that's almost a lost cause, so to speak. Will that mean that there will be an arms race? It probably yes. There might be entities that says we want to have certificates so that we can get into your traffic. On the same hand, there is an arms race of making sure that those certificates can be validated by out-of-band systems, like I'm going to get a little bit technical, DANE and notary services and stapled certificates in browsers. So that was the long form of yes to the first question. The longer form, the slightly shorter long form of yes to the second question, which is, will we see more introduction of malware by the intelligence agencies and so on and so forth? I don't know how to quantify that, if it's going to be more or at the same level, because I don't know how much this happens. I find it my personal opinion about this is that I find it disturbing. I find that a disturbing trend, again, because there is this trade-off between, well, there's a trade-off between two public goods, the public safety, but also the public good of the internet. And again, this is a decision and a debate to be had, and it's a political debate, it's not a technical debate.
Отлично. Все проблемы решены. Итак, почему я, собственно, хотел поговорить про IPv6? Ну, помимо того, что проблема злободневная, RIPE-NCC — это одна из регистратур, европейская интернет-регистратура, которая как раз и занимается аллокацией IPv6 адресов. И по миру таких 5, включая нас, мы работаем по региональному принципу, по географическому принципу. Соответственно, все IP-адреса, которые получаются в этом регионе, они идут от RIPE-NCC. Следовательно, мы считаем себя крупнейшим техническим сообществом, объединяющим огромный регион, диверсивный очень регион, очень разный. И помимо того, что мы занимаемся аллокацией IP-адресов, мы еще и являемся центром технологической экспертизы, услуг, в том числе технических.
Technical services. I will have little time in order to cover all these things, but Jim will make presentation about the importance of measurement in internet, and RIPE map is a good example how these measurements can be done. IPv6, all you know, this is the new protocol, but it is conditionally new, so because it has started, they have started developing this protocol a long time ago. In 1998 it was presented. It was kind of replacement of IPv4. And since we have more and more addresses, we have a big increase of number of IP addresses compared to IPv4. In IPv6 we have other approaches to distribution of the addresses, on the security, on configuration of the networks, etc. Why this IPv6 is needed for? As Olaf mentioned in the morning, so more than 4 billion addresses in IPv4, and the engineers understood that these addresses will not be enough. If you look at the diagram of increase of internet use, it was expected that this number of addresses will not be enough, and the European register is the first. It has exhausted all its resources of IPv4. It happened 2 years ago, and currently we are issuing the recent location of IPv4, and after that we will start issuing IPv6. and this IPv4 will not be available anymore, and there is no hope that it will be multiplied, so it will not happen. We have talked much about increase of the users. I will show you. It is not just 10% from the 10th to the 14th, but the increase of the population of the universe has also affected this number. The users is 7.2 billion users. We have talked a lot of things about the internet, and your machines will be communicating with machines around and transfer information about the traffic and take data from the municipal services and get information about which roads are blocked. So there is a giant interconnected infrastructure of things which are communicating with each other, and all the things will demand separate IP address, and which is also important, which Olaf already mentioned. He's present one of the principles of building. And then is this end-to-end connectivity. This is direct communication between 2 points. And in order to keep this principle and to keep it as a priority, we need separate address for each. Who knows what is NAT? The two people know. Okay, not all of you know. NAT is a technology which enables, with the help of IPv1 address, to distribute to many users, depending on how sophisticated this box is. And in addition to direct communication of IPv6, there is an issue of security if we use NAT. If we use this technology, the security is in the following. You have one NAT, big blocks of apartment, 150 apartments, households, 300 users, and for instance, one of them is spamming. This is the best scenario. But in the worst scenario, he can do better, even worse things. It will be difficult to identify that person. We can just track up to the point of entry, to the entry point to this building. And in addition, there is an issue of operating some applications in this NAT. And it is very difficult to set NAT. And I have already mentioned that the last addresses of IPv6 are distributed, and local internet registration is distributed, and the big operators they can request this last remaining 1,000 IPv4, and they can start requesting IPv6. The company has the plans of implementing IPv6. And we will 1,024 addresses will be distributed to any LIR. The new one can have a right, has a right to use this opportunity once. Therefore, this is the graphic, the schedule. In total, we have 16 LIRs, and in green, Kyrgyz Telecom has already requested this. And 1,024 addresses, very short and very small stock in the transition period. When you learn how to use and in order to keep up your business work, this is not so much. Second is IPv6. It's a giant number of, and by 2025, 50 billion users will be connected. This is not so much in compared to IPv6 addresses. This is separate and quite new protocols. Therefore, these two IPv4 and 6 are not compatible. And we need to train specialized and upgrade some equipment, and which is one of the factors that can be considered as a constraints in quick implementation. This slide has already been shown today. It has been modified a bit. About 5% of users already use IPv6. This is the statistics collected by Google. You know that the Google service is one of the most popular search system, and YouTube. There are few countries who are ahead of all other countries in this, and we can say that generally the whole world, all the countries are at the same level. More details about this. This is the map of penetration and distribution of IPv6. Certainly USA is outstanding. We can say that this is peculiar to the most developed Latin American, Portugal, Romania is a small country, but still Belgium is the champion in implementation of IPv6 together with Switzerland. In USA, the users make 12.5 users, but the USA is a big market, and 12% is a good number. And several operators you can see on the slide. These are the largest operators. Some small operators can also demonstrate IPv6, but the connection is not so high volume. In case of USA, the regional registration is different. They have their own system of registration, and they have not. They still have some stock of IPv4, and therefore for US it was business decision. Certainly they were expecting that in 2 years there will be the IP addresses of IPv4 will not be enough. But on the other hand, they understood that they cannot avoid using IPv6. They started to implement, therefore, Belgium. The rate and the speed, how quickly they did, was amazing. And they have reached 35.9% within 12 months. Switzerland is behind Belgium, but by the end, we believe that by the end of the year, we expect that the percentage will be higher. On the other hand, Belgium is not one of the richest countries or super rich country, but anyway, they have some operators that cover some good share of the market, and they have decided that economically feasible to implement IPv6.
Using the outdated technology and trying with the support of NATO to do something. Romania is another not very wealthy country, has a good percentage, and we believe it's good when we had 2 digits. And it is combined, as I said 3 times, by economic relevance of this decision. They understood that for them that means saved money. Probably initially today it would require certain investments, certain costs, but in several years prospect, in the nearest future, depending on the growth of operator, this decision or solution is economically justified, and they couldn't have done anything different. Another question which sometimes is of a concern of technical experts. The 4 works, we know how it works, but if something will be lost or something else, but with the case of these 3 countries there are no problems. Otherwise, we would heard about that. That means that everything is well developed and wonderful. I didn't change. And in Azerbaijan, I made a presentation last year, and RIPE CC provides stars to the operators depending on how far they have advanced in IPv6 introduction. There are 16, and 6 of them have not requested IPv6, and the 4 operators have already requested, and 2 and 3, they are accessible. 3, they have policy of routing, which is maintained by RIPE CC, and we can see them there as IPv6 radio operators, and 4 stars have not been mastered by anyone. What's happening in the neighboring countries? I think that you can see the acronyms: Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Russia, and European indicator, and Kyrgyzstan just in the middle. And on the right hand side is European, and you see the difference in 4 stars, which means that most likely in Kyrgyzstan day-to-day use of WV6 is not used. They have some plans, but nevertheless they do not use it. We heard that there are no data of users, but you can see that in general we cannot say that there is a big difference from Russia. Russia is a huge market, rather rich, 3 operators, but not a big difference, which means that you should not wait for anybody else, and you should take leading positions here. What would happen if it is not implemented? People say that it's easier to keep it as it is, and you can get some more IPv4 addresses and to buy them at the secondary market, and they're very expensive, from $10 to $15 per address you can buy from the other operator. But depending on the number of the requested addresses, it could be rather substantial amount. And once again, that no IPv4 addresses will appear, and NAT technology also has end reserves, and there is a likelihood that it will rechannel traffic differently when users get to the external resource. The traffic could be lost. And then the issue is open: how many users could be sustained by NATO, and there is a security issue. What about if many people simultaneously would request access to internet? Would the technology sustain that? How to introduce new services, how to expand the clientele base? And I think you understand the answers on all these questions that push towards IPv6 development and adoption. How to get them? Local registrants, LIRs, there are 16 of them. In Kyrgyzstan can request at any time from RIPE CC about 16 million addresses. It's like 64 free of charge. Like previous TV4 addresses were free of charge, and TVC6 is also free of charge, but don't confuse it with the secondary market. Which means that there are no obstacles at all. One can get minimum location without explaining whether you have that many users or not, and there are many addresses. If you are not the member of RIPE CC, you can request addresses from the RIPE CC member. Sometimes the company charge for that, but CC doesn't interfere, so it's up to you to arrange. Difficulties. Most likely, The operators understood that the easiest difficulty is a need to modernize infrastructure, which means to invest funds and to train experts. And I would like you to understand one very important thing, that today investment in modernization of the infrastructure will save much more if for the next 3 to 5 years, provided the current growth, modernization of the infrastructure that can work based on V4 would be more expensive than current introduction of V6, which for the third and fourth years would cost 0 soms. Which means that we need to understand that simply V6 doesn't give anything for your current business, that it would not impact the fact that at the end of the year you would have more income or more subscribers, but it would impact the fact that in 1 year from now you will be developing in a sustainable way. And therefore, this is not an operational issue, this is a capital issue. And another difficulty is the part of equipment does not support V6. It's not even operators' equipment, but equipment of the users. Because V6 introduction has a tripartite thinks it's operators, users, and content providers. For the operators, this is their burden. As to the content providers, the largest global content providers have already transformed or are in transition. And I saw top 10 in Kyrgyzstan, and I counted minimum 7 largest servers like Google, Yandex, and so on that have already support V6. Therefore, for content providers, this is the less painful process, simple and easy. But this is the issue of several days. For the end user, it's a serious issue, because from the point of view of marketer, to explain the user why he or she should change his home modem, it could be problematic. And operators probably would not invest into marketing of this issue. Therefore, there are several scenarios. The experience of Switzerland demonstrates that operator provided equipment for the users, and all of a sudden the country transited to V6, and the majority of users did not know about that. And probably this is right, because for the user it's no difference. But then, in this part of the world, there are some difficulties with replacement of home equipment. People prefer to keep it as long as possible. If the 1995 modern operational, let it be working. So there is a problem, and one of the solutions is that at a certain moment, evolutionaries, they would stop producing equipment that work as V6, like smartphones stop to be without photo camera. You cannot find such a smartphone now, because this function is required by all. Therefore, it could happen very soon. And some people use approach to restrict supply of V4 equipment, both users' equipment and industrial equipment for the operators. And we can sum up. And capacity building is another problem, because people that know how V4 works does not know how V6 works. So we need training. Almaz said that Cisco Academy is training on V6. This is a very right decision, and I think this is not the first year that Cisco does it, because Cisco is the main producer of V6 equipment, and NATO too. From our side, we also do a lot of capacity building in the region, in Europe, in the Middle East. And we provide hands-on training course how to introduce V6. 20 experts from industries for companies, and several of our experts give some examples. What can you do as participants of the market, as operators? First of all, you need to think over the V6 introduction plan. The basic principle, you need to start examining your network. At a certain moment, once you've understood which equipment you have, you will be surprised how many pieces of V6 equipment you have. And your network probably up to 90%, like last week in Azerbaijan, mobile operator said that when we studied our own system, it turned out that the network was 90% ready, prepared. And after you have this information, you can think over the implementation plan. Trained experts and to start. It's not a very complex science, and there are lots of materials that are provided by us and by many other structures, and we are ready to assist you. How can we assist? IPv6 roadshow, training courses, and jointly with the government we carry out such activities, because there are some regions where the business is ready, and there are some other regions which look at the regulator. Let us introduce. And according to the useful documents, and there is a requirement to support V6 for equipment, RIP 554. It's a very useful document. When you look at your network, there is a list of equipment supported by V6 and not supported by V6. It's very easy. Look what you have, compare with RIP 554, and you understand whether it is ready or not. What can the government do? Unfortunately, we do not have a regulator here, but first of all, it can arrange the forum to share experience. The events where we can describe our problems, share experience, and secondly, the government could become a role model and start introduction of V6 at its own networks. And sometimes some governments initiate implementation plan for IPv6, its roadmap or guidelines. And this is the set of recommendations which signal defense, let's get it started. So one should not wait for the others. It's better to start right now. Operators with large market share can change a lot, because their example could be replicated and could have proper message for the others. To inform users about introduction of V6, we give such a recommendation, but I believe that it will be resolved by natural market evolution. And some useful links. Am I right in my understanding that these presentations will be placed somewhere? Да, на веб-сайт ISO. Я уже сейчас даю свое разрешение. These 4 links you can find on ISOC website. RIP Atlas. We finished with CV6. And what is RIPE Atlas? That is the global devices to check the internet hubs. This is a small plug-and-play box which could be connected into your network that allows to look at your network from outside, which means measurement, how the traffic from Europe goes to your network, or from Kazakhstan, or from Tajikistan, or from Uzbekistan, and how many nodes should be passed when you come from Kyrgyz point to point in Uzbekistan. So it's very useful information about accessibility of your network. These are free of charge devices, development of RIPE-CC, and you can request them from the website, which I will show you later. Now we have 6.5 thousand of them globally. The more we have them, the better, because then you can have more accurate results. If we have overwhelming coverage, then we can provide you with more accurate information about how you can see the network from outside. They are easily integrated with your monitoring system if you have them, and advantages plus assistance to the global community. In Kyrgyzstan there are only 3 of them, 2 in Bishkek, and honestly speaking it's difficult for me to say where is the third one, and they do not provide very accurate information. It's a privacy issue, but anyway there are 3 of them in Kyrgyzstan. In Almaty there are 22 of them. That's how it looks, and you can request on this address, and there you can find the information about what it is and what research could be done and so on. That is end. I'm interested in this sentence. Do you have this RIPE Atlas or not? I think it was a guy from Jumgal who put this sentence somewhere. Okay, let us continue then.
Again, we are giving the floor to James. He's the chief scientist of DIAN, and he will talk about importance of measuring connectivity. So we like when we are measured, and therefore we're giving the floor to James.
Good. Can we go? This is a replay of what you saw this morning. We can just go right through it. I put these together in one deck. And to remind you, this morning we were taking a look at the geographic overview of how connectivity works and how perhaps someday it could work here. The next step is measurement, and I appreciated the follow-in from Maxim about measurement. It used to be the case that internet measurement was only for engineers, that people who ran networks would measure the networks to make sure that they were performing efficiently. Unfortunately, we now live in the era of, and I'll say it, big data. And so now every one of us is potentially a consumer of measurement, even if we are, or especially if we are in a decision-making position, trying to decide what to invest in, or what to support, or what to promote. So here I'm going to go through a couple of the different ways that at DIAN we think about internet measurement to support decision making. And you have to apologize. I have to apologize if I'm getting a little bit stuttery. The sun is coming up now at my house in the United States. So I've stayed up all night with you. I have to wait. Yeah, now I have to go to work. So once again, here's our measurement infrastructure. Everything that I'll show you today is derived from data that came from this infrastructure that we've been collecting. Again, it's a combination of routing measurement and traceroute-based latency measurement. So it's important to measure. Mostly it's important to measure a lot of different things so that we can look at the same problems of development from different angles. So the first thing, I think the most important thing from our perspective here as we look at Central Asian Internet is the relationships. So we want to identify all the service providers who are serving a market. We want to identify the nature of their relationship together. Who's paying money to whom? Because that, as we've seen, that determines so much of how the Internet evolves. So we want to figure out, once they've made these bilateral arrangements with each other, is it for free, or are they paying money? If they're paying money, who's paying money, who's receiving money? These are sort of the essential questions. Once that's set up, then we have the paths. And so at the physical layer, if we're doing traceroute, you'll see a lot of different ways to get every job completed on the Internet. Between any two cities, between any two providers, there will inevitably be a very large number of paths. And the goal of measurement is to measure enough that you see all of these paths, and that when there are new paths, you see them quickly. And when old paths stop working, you stop seeing them in your measurements. So finally, we want to talk about the performance and reliability of the Internet. So having studied the relationships and the paths, now we need to see how fast does it work? Are the latencies, the delays that we see on the Internet along particular paths sufficient? Because we're all trying to do something on the Internet. Maybe we're trying to make phone calls. Maybe we're trying to do telemedicine. Maybe we're trying to do robotic surgery, right? There's a certain level of latency and quality that these applications require. We want to make sure that we know what we have. So I will take just a couple slides to define terms, because otherwise we don't know what we're measuring. This is a prefix, a network prefix, a block of IP, in this case IPv4 addresses. It happens to be the block that belongs to the World Bank's office here in Bishkek. So it's somewhere on Chewy Street, I think. It's about 256 addresses in a little block. And it's on the Internet, one of 500,000 just like it, each of which is reachable. So then we have autonomous system, which is really just an organization with a number. It's applied for a number to the registry. It's been given a unique number so that it can route whatever networks, whatever prefixes it has. In this case, this is one of LCAT's customers, the bank prefix here in Bishkek. And then we see arrows in my diagrams between autonomous systems. That means there's a relationship. Somebody is sending somebody traffic. Probably somebody is sending money back the other way. And so we see here, for example, that LCAT is buying from VimpelCom. Traffic flows into Kyrgyz Republic on LCAT's networks. Money flows out of the Kyrgyz Republic to VimpelCom into their bank account. And this is the transit arrangement. It basically says, I'll take your traffic anywhere on Earth you need it to go. That's what I pay for. We can also do peering, which is where two autonomous systems exchange visibility with each other's customers privately. But there's no guarantee that that traffic will be carried everywhere in the world. So typically that costs less, or very often it costs nothing. That's obviously a great situation if you have a lot of local peering. So then we can, with those basic terms, we can start to make maps like this. So here's an example from our neighbor Kazakhstan. Here's the largest bank, Kazkom, the commercial bank of Kazakhstan. And we can actually look into the routing data and measure on this particular day and on all previous days, how do they get the job done? How do they reach the Internet with this bank prefix? And you can see here that there are two sets, two routing level paths. One, on top, is a terrestrial connection between this bank and Kazakh Telecom. Kazakh Telecom, in turn, is buying transit from more providers, this time in Russia, so Megaphone and TTK are selling transit. And it makes this nice web of connection. Rostelecom is in there getting some of the money from the bank. If that path should fail, of course, there's a second path, because no bank is without two paths to the internet. The second one in this case is through Orbita Plus, which is a local Kazakh satellite provider. And that comes back down to a ground station somewhere in Russia and gets onto VimpelCom's network and then off to the internet core. So anybody that this bank wants to talk to on Earth on any given day, the traffic is probably going to go out and return through one or both of these major directions we can go. So then we think about what are transit strategies that an organization might do. And we can take any ISP, in fact any autonomous system, and examine the history of how they did that trick. How many providers did they have? 1, 2, some have 5, some have 10. It just depends on how much money you want to spend. So we can take a quick look at the recent history of some of the Kyrgyz providers. Here's LCAT, who we saw before, and we showed that they buy transit from VimpelCom. The x-axis here is time. This goes from June through now. And the y-axis is a percentage. So the fact that this is all gray says that basically LCAT is buying transit from VimpelCom. Period, end of story. There's a little bit of blue. Blue is Orbita Plus. So there's a satellite backup link which comes into play occasionally, a little bit on certain days, and they take a little bit of the transit. But by and large, this job is being done with one provider, VimpelCom. You can take a look. Here's a 50-50. So here's ACNet. ACNet is splitting its transit between IPNet and Cons Transcom. And you can see that on a day-to-day basis it fluctuates a little bit, but basically it's a split. And that's a pretty good way to do this. You have two providers equally capable, and you divide your traffic among them, so to speak. So we're looking, remember, from the outside in, we're looking from the whole planet and counting how many of our measurement points, like the IPNet route versus the Cos Transcom route. Here's Megaline. I'll just go quickly through these. You can see interesting things here in trends. Here's a provider, here's Cos Transcom going away. They lose their contract, right? They become singly homed. They only have IPNet. And then they have a problem, so they fail back to VimpelCom. And you can see these moments in time. You can see the money being spent. You can see the decisions being made. And this is available to all of us, right? This is not proprietary commercial information. This is in the BGP routing protocol. Everybody on Earth sees it. It's just that most people don't dig in and figure out what it means. Here's Kyrgyz Telecom, right? Mostly dividing transit between Kvant, about 80%, maybe perhaps 70%, of the routes, not necessarily the traffic, and some Kazakh Telecom. Pretty stable over time. Okay, so that's an interesting way to look. What else can we do with autonomous systems? Sometimes the simplest thing to do, instead of doing all of this data analysis, is just to count them. So let's take a look at some nearby markets and just count autonomous systems of different kinds. Here's the number of domestic autonomous systems. So these are the organizations that we consider to be domestic in each country. Domestic means that at least 80% of your customers that we see are in that country. So in this case, VimpelCom is not a domestic provider here. I'm not even sure they're a domestic provider in Russia. They may be an international provider everywhere. But if you count them up, you can see that Kyrgyzstan's doing quite well. Kyrgyzstan has nearly as many domestic providers as Afghanistan or Uzbekistan. A third as many as Kazakhstan, which is much, much larger. You can see Azerbaijan, again, of similar size. You can see that Turkmenistan has only 3. You can see that Russia is extremely large. You can see, curiously, that China, with all of the billions of people there, only have 284 autonomous systems. That's kind of like adding everybody here up together, and you get China. That's because in China, the state telecom, China Telecom, does a lot of the work. There are fewer independent organizations operating that internet. There's a much lower degree of resilience and quality. I shouldn't say quality. There's a much lower degree of diversity and resilience in that market as a result. And you can see that in Western Europe, there are large numbers, although really not as large as in Russia. Russia is an extremely large and diverse market that we're feeding traffic to. And we just take those numbers and divide them by population. That's another simple way to do it. Let's just count autonomous systems and divide by millions of people. And again, Kyrgyzstan is not doing badly. It's doing very well. China, all of your neighbors here down below too, everybody down south. You have Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan doing about the same. Considering that they're vastly different countries, this is really interesting. So that's a very positive number, I think, when we look at that. And I believe I've seen the OECD doing some research that suggested that this number, autonomous systems per capita, actually does correlate with GDP growth. I need a citation for that. And the worldwide average is about 7. So in that sense, Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan are right in line with the global average, which is quite encouraging. This is a subtle one. I think this is the last one of this sequence. An autonomous system is on the frontier if it's allowed to buy, or if it's able to buy, connectivity from somebody outside their country. That's a very simple thing to compute. I just look and find out how many people does each autonomous system buy from. Are any of them international? And you can imagine that that might be very important for determining how much choice there is in a market. Is there an internet exchange, for example, in the market where international providers arrive and are able to sell transit trivially or easily to lots of people in the country? That's a very powerful thing if you can get it to happen. So we want to see as many internationally connected autonomous systems as possible. And if the numbers are too low, 3 out of 33, or 2, or in Uzbekistan, just 1. Right? There's only one autonomous system, and they're the incumbent in Uzbekistan who's actually able to reach outside their own market. That's really fragile. And that's something that we see around the planet in places like Syria or North Korea or Yemen, places that tend to have very serious internet disruptions from time to time that last hours or days. For resilience, for survival, we want to see numbers that are higher. 7 and 8 is pretty good. 21 is quite good. 339, we hear a lot about the internet disconnection of Russia, but that's a lot of international diversity that would have to be turned off in order to make the internet stop working in Russia. Iran, of course, has only 9 of 310. So we'll just take one more look at provider dominance. Let's not say dominance because there may be regulators in the audience and they don't like the word dominance. It has a very specific meaning. But let's just compute. Take the largest provider in each country and figure out what percentage of the country is their customer. And if you're in Turkmenistan, 97% of everything, and that's probably an error, it's probably 100%, is Turkmen Telecom's customer. And in Azerbaijan, similarly, in Kazakhstan, it's very high, 87%. We work our way down to the other end of the spectrum. In Germany, the largest domestic network in Germany is probably EU Networks. Only 9% of Germany is their customer. And this is a very wide spectrum for one statistic. This dotted line is the world average, 45%. And both Tajikistan and the Kyrgyz Republic are right there at that average, which again is quite impressive. Again, this is the same statistic that was on the other map. Look, it correlates. You can see small numbers of internationally connected providers, relatively speaking, for people where the incumbent is very powerful, as you'd expect. And you can see that as we go towards small provider dominance, we get very large numbers of international connectivity. So this is good. We want to climb this ranking. We can look at latency. Latency is, of course, the best thing, the easiest thing, perhaps, to measure. You just have to measure the delays into a market from all over the planet. Here we've actually taken a screenshot from our Internet Intelligence tool, where we're literally measuring to Bishkek. And the dots are colored according to how long it takes. And you can see that to get to East Asia takes more than 300 milliseconds. On the other side of it, we can see 50 to 100 milliseconds for a lot of Scandinavia and a lot of Eastern Europe. And everybody else is kind of in between. It's telling that it takes a very long time to get to Iran. It takes a very long time to get to Tashkent because there's not a lot of local connectivity here to exploit. Things are going out and coming back. We can dig in on particular providers if we want to do per provider internet measurement. Let's just take all of our measurements and scatter plot them and see what they correlate with. So here I'm measuring from Amsterdam into Kyrgyz Telecom over the course of several months. And what I can see here is I've got two bands. Here's purple. These, I apologize, these are autonomous system numbers, so you have to know who they are. But if you're coming in through Kvant, you get a wide range of outcomes from about 100 to 200 milliseconds, or maybe 180. And then there are two other pads here coming in through TTK. Not a direct provider, but they're the last logical hop in the trace. And it's interesting, look, there's two modes in the distribution, low and high. So that tells me that there's got to be two pads, physical pads with different latencies.
A clarification question.
Please.
I guess you measure the trace route from Kyrgyz Telecom to Amsterdam and the delay from Amsterdam to Kyrgyz.
It's actually a round-trip measurement it's a round-trip latency.
Okay,
so
great.
it's an excellent question. They're often not the same. But this is a measurement from Amsterdam into all of Kyrgyz Telecom across the country, measuring the round-trip latency. And you're right, the path may not be symmetric. Here we'll just take a look. Here's a different thing you can see. Sometimes there's a failure or a change in policy or a change in routing. Here's LCAT from all sources in the world. And you can see that back on July 9th, something terrible happened. And their Vimpelcom transit died. And they failed over to TNS Plus, right, which is probably hybrid satellite. I think maybe it's going out on satellite and back on terrestrial because it's a jump, but it's not a huge jump. And then it gets restored, and then it gets...
This was just transition of contract.
Was it really?
TNS Vimpelcom, the same company.
Oh, okay. So, my apologies. See, I have to come to the local market to learn the real story.
Vimpelcom is the owner of TNS.
So, it's interesting to see what happened here. If it was an internal contractual thing, a lot of the best experience is missing here. So, all of the sub 100 millisecond latencies get erased. And then it gets picked back up. Cool. So I should not call this failover. I should call this normal economics. Right? Normal contract.
They changed bank account.
The check bounced. So this is the picture from this morning, just to remind you that it starts this way. It starts with the distribution of transit from Russia. But ultimately, we have these additional modes coming in from the other watersheds, the Pakistani watershed, the Iranian watershed. We want to measure this process, and I'm just going to wrap up here. This is one of the final things I would suggest that you measure. You can actually see business relationships change, and so the important thing is to look at these changes in time and reconstruct the narrative. You know what's coming, right? I think you can...
That was confidential. I'm joking.
I get that a lot, actually. This was generated with publicly available data. Yeah, so...
Our customers introduced it.
Yes, I mean, it's great because Kyrgyz Telecom is in fact the number one, here we have in our ranking, the number one wholesale provider in Tajikistan, according to our ranking, is Kyrgyz Telecom. A very solid position. And these are the top customers, again, from the routing table. Babylon T, Telecom Technology, both older customers. We've seen these in the routing table since 2010. And then in January 2014, we see Tajik Telecom come online. Somoncom comes in April. Smaller contributions, probably just a little bit of backup transit. But then, and I think it's safe to say that...
What date is when did you...
Which...
No, I mean the picture.
The picture? I think the picture was taken in the last week. And this may go on...
There are changes already.
Okay. So this tool actually regenerates the data every day. So yeah. So the good news is that when things change, we create.
Dynamic, because some operators, they want more traffic, some of them less traffic.
Right. So it's hard to figure out what the relationships are. So we tried to turn this into a story, because we can see that Tajikistan really does, Dushanbe really does require Kyrgyz connectivity for mobile connectivity, for example. So here's a news item that comes out of the tool. We see that in October 16th, one specific customer in Tajikistan is no longer buying Kyrgyz Telecom, and it's Saturn Online.
I will not comment this.
Okay, safer perhaps not to. So we don't know what happens. We don't know why this stopped happening.
They just stop paying. You know?
Okay.
Very simple.
This is the greatest explanation. No money, no transit.
Yes, no money, no business.
Good. So they had, okay, good. So they had to figure out what to do. This is October. October passes. November passes. All right, it's December. December 5th. They finally figure out what to do. So they buy from Aftel. They buy connectivity from Afghan Telecom. And I don't know what kind of deal this was. Our tool observes that this is an unstable routing situation, that the route is being changed and withdrawn quite a lot. Aftel picks up this customer in Afghanistan, transits them to Transworld in Pakistan, who then sends it out to Omantel in Muscat. And so this is the southern transit emerging. And this is why. This is the prefix that contains contact.you.tj. An important little network that obviously they couldn't afford to leave turned off. They needed the transit for it. So that's it. That's probably the most complex kind of measurement you can have, but when you find a story like that, it's very entertaining, because you can really see the market forces at work. Yeah, and it's again, nothing proprietary, it's in the data. So that's it. I mean, I think the comments, we are going to publish the deck, so you can go back and look very carefully at the examples and review. But this is the message, that if we're doing regulation or any kind of policy decision making, or if we're trying to decide what to fund or what to invest in, this kind of data is now available to all of us. And it's available in a form that is refreshed every day. And there's a lot of information here that we've never had before, in terms of really understanding connectivity and relationships and the evolution of the relationships. So this is really exciting. I was really excited to see that there's more connectivity here than I thought I would see. And there's more different kinds of relationships coming about. And I'm hoping that by next year we'll see even more of this evolve. It should be a very interesting 12 months. So I'm going to conclude there, and we can answer some questions. This is our blog, Dyn Research. If you'd like to come visit us, it's dyn.com/research. And that's it. I thank you.
The only thing that you last show is revenue structure.
Okay, brief session, questions and answers to the panel. Thank you to James for such positive figures and encouraging figures that you demonstrated in your presentation, so that we can aim at reaching this knowledge society. No questions?
Do you want me to start? Are you guys so tired, or you know that there will be a drink in a few minutes, right?
Overwhelmed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I understand the feeling. I mean, it was really rich. Huh? I mean, no diet here, huh, with the figures. So, with that in mind, I would like you again to help me thanking this panel and the moderator. And I shall be quick. Promise. This is the last time you see me today with the mic, and I will be very quick. I would like again to thank the bunch of extraordinary people who help us to do all of this. I hope you found it interesting. It's just a start. We really have intentions to strengthen our cooperation with these wonderful people of this wonderful country, so we will. Talent, again, a wonderful, big, huge thanks to you and to your team. And I will mispronounce your name, I'm afraid, but you deserve it. This is Bermet Imanalieva. Wow. And Egerim Shalbaeva. Wow. Of course, Askar Kutanov, big thanks to you too again. Almas, thank you so much. And from well, last but not least, from our side, of course, Olaf and Howard, thank you for coming. When we mentioned actually to both those guys who are very busy that we would do something in this country, they didn't hesitate a second. They were very enthusiastic with us, so thank you for this. And of course, last but not least, Marit, our faces in this country, in this region, thanks a million for your help. And with this in mind, as we said, the internet is bits and bytes, which is also connecting with real people, so I invite you to a drink. Thank you.
Just one more question, ladies and gentlemen. If you had one of the interpreters' little machines here, you can bring them back up to the back of the room, please. Thank you.